Hello Cinnamon Bun. We're going to try something new today. Let's talk about influences, inspiration, and Kiki's delivery service. I hear from a lot of writers that they're really worried about their work being original enough. And they're worried about being compared to other things which are similar, or being seen as just being too derivative, I guess. And that is something that I used to worry about and that I don't really as much anymore. And part of that is that I now consciously work with influences in my work. So instead of trying to eliminate all influences altogether, and instead of trying to come up with something purely original just from my brain, I will think about the influences that I want to draw on, and I will work with them consciously so that I am being intentional about it, so that I'm not just ripping off one particular source of inspiration, but that I am taking the elements that interest me, putting my own twist on them, and mixing them with other things in new ways, hopefully. So instead of trying to detach myself from sources of inspiration, I actually kind of lean into it so that I can be more intentional about what I want to draw inspiration from, what I want to steal, and how I want to remix it for my own work. And so today, that is what I'm going to be doing with Kiki's delivery service. So you may or may not know that I am writing an urban fantasy novel at the moment. I've actually paused my drafting because I want to rework the theme, or the themes. And in the little amount of work that I've done on that so far, I already was like, yes, this was definitely the right decision because something wasn't working here. And so I'm taking a little break to rethink, figure out what I want to do with this story. And part of that is exploring some of my influences and inspirations for it. Kiki's Delivery Service is one of my favourite films, and it is a source of inspiration for this book, one among many. And so I was really interested in seeing what kinds of themes are going on in Kiki's Delivery Service, and how they are presented. And Kiki's Delivery Service also has a bit of a strange structure. I adore it, but it doesn't fit the traditional kind of structure that I tend to use, like that plot embryo structure. And so I just wanted to go a bit deeper. I just wanted to do a bit of analysis, do a bit of close reading, pull this thing apart and see how it works and why I like it, why it works, and see what I can glean from that and what I might be able to steal from that for my own stuff. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. I've already done some kind of preliminary research. I did a little bit of research into the production process for the film. It was actually an adaptation of a book, a children's book, and so hearing a little bit about how the book was different from the adaptation and stuff was interesting. So I have a little bit of context now, and some of the kind of themes that are often talked about and motifs and things like that. And all of that research just made me I really need to rewatch this and do a bit more of a close reading and make some notes and stuff. And I would also like to try and map it out onto a plot embryo. I don't think it's going to fit particularly well into a plot embryo because, like I said, its structure is kind of non-traditional, but I would like to see where it fits and where it doesn't, because I still think that's going to be really interesting to see it all mapped out that way. So that's what we're going to do. And I am in the very lucky position of being able to sit down and watch one of my favourite movies and say, this is writing research, and spend my afternoon that way. So let's do it.
He was much too young to hold such an important job as the president wish. Oh, hey, welcome to my desk. So, now what I'm going to do is take all of my notes and summarizing from watching the movie, and I'm going to do a plot embryo interpretation of it. Um, and so, while I am working on that and scribbling and rubbing things out and figuring it out, I'm just going to talk you through what I kind of came away with from this exercise. Before I get into what I learned specifically from analysing Kiki's delivery service, I want to talk a little bit about just the process of using a plot embryo as a tool of analysis instead of story creation. Because I'm sure if you know me and you know the kind of stuff that I do on my channel, or you're familiar with the plot embryo, you know that it's a super powerful tool for creating new stories. But obviously, what I'm doing here is a little bit different. I'm using it as a tool of analysis instead. So, when we create a story, we make a mountain, so a movie, a book, a story, out of a molehill, a plot embryo. But when we're analysing something instead of creating something, we're kind of reversing that process. So we're making a molehill, i.e., a plot embryo, out of a mountain. So the movie, the book, the story, whatever it is. And that means that essentially the process is sifting through a lot of information. So in this case, it's a movie, so it's a lot of scenes and frames and dialogue and world building and texture and story, all of that. We're sifting through all of that to pick out the important foundational parts. And doing this is necessarily a subjective process. So in doing this, I am not trying to provide some kind of definitive answer here to what Kiki's delivery service is about, what it means, how it's crafted. This is a process really of me doing my reading of it, one interpretation of a multifaceted work, which can probably be read in lots of different ways. And something else to note as well is that one plot embryo is one plot, and so there are definitely other interpretations you could do with this movie, which, for instance, focus more on Tombo's role in the plot, which maybe focus more on the themes of feeling like an outsider and friendship, or even mapping out those things as subplots and stuff, which I have not done here. I was focusing on what is my interpretation of this, of the stuff that I find to be the most important here in this story, and the stuff that interests me the most in this story. So, what did I learn? Well, for a long time, Kiki's Delivery Service has been one of my favourite movies for a really long time. It was actually the topic of, I guess, the first attempt at a YouTube video that I ever made, several years before my official kind of first video, and which is unlisted now. You can't see it. I'm sorry, because it's absolutely god awful. But that's just to say that I've been interested in the story structure of Kiki's Delivery Service for a really long time, and I always thought that it was really unusual in its structure. And what I discovered from doing this is that it isn't actually. It's really not that unusual. It actually fits the plot embryo really well. I expected to be using the plot embryo and for it to maybe not fit that well, and to be able to learn things from how and where it didn't fit. But I found that it did really fit. And what I feel like I came to with that is that what actually makes Kiki's Delivery Service feel unusual to me compared to other works in that genre, so other fantasy stories about witches and stuff, which are aimed at kids or are family friendly, in books or movies, really. The things that make it feel unusual to me is that, first of all, are twofold. First of all, there's no personified antagonist, which I think is fairly unusual. At least, I mean, obviously, your mileage may vary with the kinds of media that you've consumed in your life, but that felt very unusual to me. You could even argue that there is no central antagonist in Kiki's Delivery Service, or you could argue that like the world is the antagonist. But either way, there isn't like this personified antagonist in the same way that, I mean, I feel like when you're talking about fantasy aimed at kids, it always comes back to Harry Potter, but there's no Voldemort, obviously. Such a lazy example, but anyway. Yeah, so that's one thing that I felt is just a little bit more uncommon, that kind of makes it stand out to me. And the other one is the stakes. The stakes in Kiki's Delivery Service are very small, but they're deeply intimate. And I guess what I mean by that is like, what's at stake if the protagonist doesn't succeed at what they set out to do? So fantasy stories, and fantasy stories for all ages tend to have like larger than life stakes. Speculative fiction in general, it's very common to have really big stakes, you know, like you're saving the world or you're saving the universe. And that's not the case in Kiki's Delivery Service. The stakes pretty much only affect Kiki. Like, she is just this one small part of this really big city. She's not trying to save the world. She's not trying to save magic or do anything huge like that. She's just trying to make it on her own.
Is there anything I can do for you? I'm still in training to become a witch. If I lose my magic, that means I've lost absolutely everything. Kiki!
And I think, yeah, it was interesting to kind of think about that, I suppose. So the structure wasn't actually as unusual as I thought it was. That was one of the main things that I came away with. The other was that when I finally kind of uncovered my interpretation of the theme, it immediately became clear why I resonate so strongly with this story, like why this story matters to me, why I want to draw on it as inspiration. And so let me read it out, actually. So the way that I conceive of theme, especially in the plot embryo, is of an antithesis, so like a false belief, a false thesis that the character believes, and then the thesis. So what do they come to learn or understand? So Kiki's antithesis I had as, I have to use my magic in the service of others, no matter how tired, unhappy, or unappreciated I feel. And then what she learns, her antithesis, I have to take care of my magic and find my purpose and passion as a witch, or I can't use my magic for myself or anyone else. Yeah. So creativity and magic for me are just so deeply rooted in each other, so deeply connected, that this just makes perfect sense to me. And I think that every creative person, unless they're like born into wealth, has to wrestle with some version of this conflict, of these questions. How do I balance my creativity and my livelihood? How do I balance pragmatism and passion if my creativity is my livelihood? And what does it mean to make it as a creative?
Flying used to be fun until I started doing it for a living.
Wait, you can't not enjoy flying. You're a witch.
I know, I still feel that way though. But
These are all the questions that I feel like Kiki's Delivery Service is exploring, and I just think it makes so much sense. Like if you take that theme, you know, that antithesis and thesis, and you replace the word magic with creativity, and you replace the word witch with creative, it becomes so obvious why this movie resonates so deeply for so many people. because these are questions that so many people wrestle with. And I think that also speaks to why this movie resonates so deeply and means so much to adults as well as children. Like, I first saw Kiki's Delivery Service when I was a child, or at the very least, like an early teen. And I loved it then as well, but that love has only endured into adulthood. It hasn't really ever gone away. It doesn't feel juvenile. I don't really feel like I've ever outgrown it. And I think that theme is part of why, because that theme about how do we make it as creatives, how do we balance creativity and making a living, is such an adult struggle. And I think that it works really well with the other themes of like friendship and feeling like an outsider and making friends, which is kind of what the whole thread with Tombo and his friends deals with. And that is like much more of a typical kind of thematic thing for kids' stories. They tend to deal with friendship because those are the kinds of struggles that kids are dealing with. So I just found that really interesting. And lastly, the final thing that I wanted to talk about is, so the theme is something that resonates really deeply for me. But I think the other thing that I realised from doing this is that the way magic is used in this story is one of the things that I love about it so much. So it seems to me like magic in a lot of fiction functions as a metaphor for power. Who has power, who doesn't have it, how they wield it. Magic is often a power fantasy for people in fantasy and speculative fiction. In Kiki's Delivery Service, magic is not a metaphor for power. It is a metaphor for creativity.
Painting and magical power seem very much the same. Sometimes I'm unable to paint a thing.
And using magic allegorically in that way, I feel like isn't as common. Again, all of this is super anecdotal. I've not done any stats or studies. I don't even know where I'd begin with that, but it seems self-evident to me. And I think that also feeds into why this film is so beloved. I think that magic as a metaphor for creativity is actually a lot more relatable for more people, because many, many more people in this world are creative than powerful. I think everyone is creative to a certain extent, but there's only a small subset of people who have actual power. And I think it also means that because magic isn't a metaphor for power in this world, it provides an escape from wrestling with ideas about power, oppression, violence, and all that kind of thing. At least wrestling with them in a direct way, in a way that, a lot of speculative fiction and fantasy fiction does. So Kiki is fantasy, but it's not power fantasy. And I think that's why it feels so escapist and comforting for me and for so many other people as well. So that was super interesting. And the last thing I want to say is just to wrap up, I guess, just that, like, whenever you embark on something like this, especially like me, if you're making a video out of it or something, there's an element in the beginning of like, am I going to get anything out of this? Is this a worthwhile endeavor? Should I be spending my time doing this kind of analysis, or should I just be fucking writing? And I just wanted to wrap up by saying, like, I'm really glad I did this analysis, because I think I've gotten a lot of value out of it. And I think the value of doing this kind of conscious analysis of sources of inspiration and influence is that I now know what the key parts of this work are for me. Like, I know what it is that I love about it. And those things for me, the things that I love about Kiki's delivery service, the things that make it resonate for me, the things that I want to draw on are twofold. It is the theme, and then it's also that idea of magic as a metaphor for creativity rather than power or something else. And now that I have like drilled down and I know that those are the two parts that I find to be important about this, I can then go off and use that information to inform my own stories, without just ripping off Kiki's delivery service or like replicating the superficial elements of it. Because you could very easily write, you know, a story about a young witch who moves to a new city and is like making it on her own, without actually, and like replicating all these superficial elements, even having her fly or have a delivery service or something like that, without really understanding what it is that you love about it. And I feel like you're just gonna, first of all, like there's the issue of like plagiarism and just copying too much from one source of inspiration. But then also just like, I kind of like, that would be really frustrating to feel like I'm really not hitting what it is that I love about this story. And so, yeah, it's really cool. I feel like now that I know that those parts are important to me, I can figure out, okay, well, how do I want to play with that? How do I want to work with a similar theme topic, or do something along those lines? Or what would my spin on magic as creativity be, etc. Yeah, so if you've never tried using a plot embryo interpretation to analyse something that you want to inspire your own work, maybe this will inspire you to do so. After all, you have to find your own inspiration.
Maybe I have to find my own inspiration.
And welcome to the end of this video. If you liked it, I do have two things that you might be interested in. The first is that I have a free 7-day like mini course on the plot embryo, which you can find at rachelstephen.com/plot for free. And the other is that I actually do a monthly live stream, where most of the time we do like writing sessions where we do sprints together and stuff, but sometimes they're just kind of chatty as well. And so you can join that. Oh, it's on the 25th of each month at the moment. Not planning on moving it anytime soon, but yeah. And so you can find that at patreon.com/RachelStephen, and you can join that for like $2 a month. Yeah, I think that's about it. I know it's been a little bit of a while since I've put out a new video. I've been ill yet again, and there's been some other kind of big projects behind the scenes that have been taking up a lot of my time. I'm also thinking about doing NaNoWriMo next month, which was completely unplanned, so I might be doing more kind of live stream write-ins than videos. I'm not sure. We will see. Please don't hold me to that. Anyway, I hope you're doing well. Take care, and I'll see you next time.